Hello, everybody. Welcome to Zone Defense. Be sure to follow us on Spotify at Zone Defense Podcast, on Twitter at Zone Defense Pod, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at Zone Defense Podcast. And be sure to ring that bell to get post notifications. Also, smash that like button and drop a comment down below and let us know your thoughts on today's topic. Today, Chris and I are diving into part one of our NBA preview, breaking down the Atlantic Division. How's it going, Chris?
It's going well, man. I'm really excited to dive into some of these divisions today. The Atlantic Division, definitely one of the more competitive in the league, and a lot of teams to talk about here that are going to be really interesting, and then the Knicks as well. So it'll be really fun to talk about 4 of the 5 of the teams.
100% agree. It's been a long time since we did an NBA episode. We've been doing a lot of NFL content lately, so I'm really looking forward to that. For those that maybe don't know, NBA is like my main sport. NFL is a little bit lower, so I'm really, really excited to talk about it with you today. But let's jump into our first team here, the Toronto Raptors, who last year, somewhat surprisingly, after losing Kawhi Leonard and winning the championship in 2019, finished 53-19, which was good for second in the Eastern Conference. And they lost in probably one of the best playoff series of the year last year, the second round series against the Celtics. Really good competitive series, was really close to winning the Eastern Conference or making to the Eastern Conference Finals. And overall, I would say a successful season, even though they didn't win the championship, they couldn't repeat as champions. Myself included, I thought they might be in danger of missing the playoffs, and they way surpassed my expectations, even after losing a superstar like Kawhi. But this free agency period, in terms of additions, they added Aaron Baines, Alex Len, they drafted Malachi Flynn, and they got DeAndre Bembry. In terms of subtractions, some notable names, but they're a little bit in the twilight of their careers, and Marc Gasol and Serge Ibaka, as well as Rondae Hollis-Jefferson, who was kind of an underrated name, but I thought he was pretty decent for them in the bubble and in the playoffs, but not a huge name by any means. Right. But on the right side here, we got the 3 keys to watch. Chris, which one is your biggest key? What are you most looking forward to seeing with the Raptors this year?
Well, I know you kind of on the subtractions, Gasol and Ibaka on the decline. That's for sure. These are old players, but these are veteran presences. I think the number 2 one, who can replace Gasol and Ibaka, is definitely going to be a key. And I'll go ahead and address it, and I'll let you talk about it as well. But I think with them, both guys obviously provide leadership because they're 2 of the older players on the team, and I think they're still both pretty solid. Gasol, really good defensively, a good playmaker as well. Doesn't offer a ton on the offense side of the ball, but it's going to be tough to replace his defense. I really don't know who's going to step up. They did sign Aaron Baines. I think he's a decent center as well. I think he could contribute. Alex Len, maybe not so much, but we'll see. He's a potential reclamation project could fill in for him. And then Serge Ibaka, I think he was underrated in the bubble as well. He was averaging, I think, maybe 18, 19 a game in the bubble. I felt like he had a lot of different games where he kind of took over even. I remember he had one game against the Nets where he was absolutely on fire. I think he had 31 points or something like that in one of those games in the series, but he was a serious contributor to this team. I know he's, like you said, a little bit older, but another really good defensive player. I think this team could struggle a little bit defensively. What's your opinion on these 2 guys and what they can do to replace them?
I think, Gasol was bad. Like, he looked really old in the bubble. And I know we're going to talk about the Heat in a later episode, but it's hard to, how much seriousness can you take out of the bubble? Was it real? Was it like this weird March Madness vibe? It's hard to make, full assumptions based on the bubble, but Marc Gasol did not look good. He really looked old. So I think it's not entirely a bad thing that they lost him. But you did mention Ibaka was really good for them. He's a huge addition for the Clippers, a huge upgrade there, and a huge downgrade for the Raptors. But I think Aaron Baines will fill that hole quite nicely. He had a really nice season with the Suns last year. It was on the Suns, so not many people noticed it most likely. But he's a solid, he's a decent defender, but he's got a really nice 3-point shot. He's worked on that. He's a really tough guy, brings some nice leadership. Alex Len, he's a young guy. He's younger, I guess. He's not terrible. And if he can at least bring 80 to 90% of what Marc Gasol brought to the table, I think they'll be okay. In terms, I know it's a big loss, but I think they did enough in free agency with Baines and Len to address that need. So it's not as big a concern for me when it comes to the Raptors. For me, I'm more concerned about a little bit of the other keys to watch that we have listed there.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I think it was definitely by not getting those two back. I think they made up for it a little bit by getting Freddie Van Fleet back. I mean, he's obviously a streaky, really good scorer. I know the Pistons were interested in him. I know Drew doesn't. He isn't as high on him. I'm not calling him a superstar, but he's a guy that can take over every once in a while. He's got a really nice 3-point shot. He's probably their best offensive player. I would say maybe you can make the argument for Siakam, but I think his all around game makes him the best player. Not exactly his scoring. I think Van Fleet can take over that role. But I do agree, signing him, maybe not the best contract, but he's still a good player and he fits well on this team too. I think if he can continue to improve his game a little bit, I think he can make up for some of those losses, as well as Aaron Baines, Alex Len, and maybe even DeAndre Bembry a little bit, providing a little bit of scoring at the 2-3 spot. But let's go ahead and get into our first key to watch as well. Pascal Siakam I think he's a pretty controversial player. I mean, I think he's really good. I think he continues to improve. But I know some people, especially a couple of my friends, that think he has pretty much reached his ceiling as a player, which I tend to not agree with that. But I'm really curious. Can he take the next step? I'll answer it first. I think he can. I think this is the time. Losing Gasol and Ibaka, I think he can really he could step into a bigger role this year and maybe up his scoring a little bit. I know this year I thought he played really well outside of the bubble, but like you said, the bubble was a little bit fluky. Could have been just the conditions. He just didn't have as much confidence, or if he's still on the younger side of a player. I think he still has some potential improvements on the offensive side. You know, he's a really good defensive player. I think he definitely has some stride to take as a 3-point shooter and a playmaker. Drew, what do you think about Siakam?
It's tough, man, because you mentioned it there. He did not look good in the bubble, and that's easy to say. But he also did not play well the second half of the year leading up to the shutdown. He got off to a really fast start. That's kind of propelled him into the All-Star game. Everybody was worried with the loss of Kawhi, who would take the reins, and Siakam proved that he could be that guy. But then the second, I believe his points per, really his stats across the board steadily declined, if I remember correctly, as the season wore on. And then in the bubble, it really he looked really, really bad out there. And it was really Lowry and Van Vliet, and even to an extent Ibaka, and even Anunoby, to a certain extent, who were carrying the load for the Raptors. And I mean, Siakam, he's got to be their guy. And it was a bad matchup in the playoffs, especially in that Celtics series with Jaylen Brown. That was a really tough matchup for Siakam. But yeah, I agree. I mean, not just talking to my friends, but also listening to other NBA experts, NBA podcasts. A lot of them, this is a big storyline, not just for the Raptors, but for the entire NBA as a whole, is can Siakam be the guy? And it seems like it's pretty 50-50. There's some guys that feel like that he can be the next person, the next Kawhi, not maybe that's Kawhi Leonard, but he can be that superstar for the Raptors and take that role on. And there's other people that think that maybe he's more of a second or third option. I tend to side with the latter. I think Siakam's best as a number 2 type of guy. I don't know if he can be a true number 1. And I know back when the Raptors won the championship, there's a lot of comparisons to like the 03-04 Pistons, where they just had a bunch of like really solid guys. I didn't really like the comparison at that time because they also had Kawhi Leonard, who's a superstar MVP type of caliber of player. This team honestly reminds me much more of those 03-04 and that era of Chauncey Billups, Ben Wallace, where they just have a ton of guys who aren't really number 1s, but they have a ton of number 2s, number 3s. They're just a really solid team. And I think this team can still be successful, even if Siakam has really reached his ceiling, because I think they took him with like a second-round pick, or he was undrafted, if I remember correctly. So this is more than enough. This is more than what you would want out of a second-round pick, is what he's providing. And I think he's going to be a solid second option. I think he maybe has a little more to go. But if he regresses or he stays the same as he did last year, it's still a solid player. But it'd probably be a little disappointing for those that maybe think he's going to turn into a superstar.
Yeah, I didn't really answer whether I think he's going to be a superstar or not, so I'll go ahead and touch up on that. I actually do think he could be a number 1 guy. I disagree with you a little bit on there. I know it wasn't pretty at the second half of this year, but he proved in an inconsistent basis he can be the guy. Beginning of the year, he was awesome, and I think he can, if he just improves his consistency a little bit more, I think he can actually be a number 1 guy on a potential championship team. For me, it's kind of like I do agree with the comparison. I was going to touch up on it. It kind of reminds me of the old Spurs team as well, when Kawhi kind of started to take over. You know, he was at one point just more of a solid player, and then in the NBA Finals, he really took over. I think Siakam in a similar role on a similar team with a lot of talent around him, a lot of, he said, number 2 guys, which he may be right now. I think he can be the guy that steps into the number 1 role this year. I think maybe there was a little bit of a learning curve without Kawhi. He was the second guy. He was really good in that role last year or the year before, 2 years ago when they won the finals. This year, I think potentially he could after the experiment last year, I think maybe he steps into that role this year. And it definitely didn't help to break the rhythm. Some guys, Jamal Murray turned from in my opinion, a little bit overrated point guard to maybe a potential superstar, but that could be a mirage as well. I think maybe Siakam struggling mightily in the playoff run and in the bubble could also be a mirage. I think he's more of the player he was during the regular season, despite a little bit of regression throughout. He was definitely still better in the regular season. But we can go ahead and jump into our third point here. Do you think this team is a legitimate contender? I'll let you go first on this one.
This is tough. Pretty much across the board, everything I've listened to, it seems like there's unanimous agreement that there's 6 solid teams in the East that all could somehow sneak into the finals. And I think the Raptors are definitely in that 6, where it'd be the Raptors, the Sixers, the Bucks, the Heat, the Nets, and I'm forgetting one more team. I can't think of it off the top of my head right now, but there's 6 teams I remember that are solid teams that have a chance to make the finals. I think the Raptors are in that realm of teams, but I think they're more on like the 4, 5, 6 range. Oh, the Celtics, that's the team I forgot. Yep. They're more in that 4, 5, 6 range, with like a team like the Heat, who they could be really good. Like last year, none of us expected them to be super good, and they were super good. But then they kind of flamed out a little bit in the playoffs. And I could see that happening again. I think they have a very high floor, though. I think the continuity, the solid players across the board, whether it be Norman Powell, OG Anunoby, they're a really solid team. So I don't think they're in danger of like missing the playoffs or anything like that. I just don't know if their ceiling's as high as some of the other teams. Because you touched on it there. I'm not a huge Fred VanVleet fan. I think he's a solid player. I wouldn't have given him that huge contract. I was kind of happy the Pistons didn't throw all that money. Of course, we decided to throw that money at Mason Plumlee, which I would have preferred Fred VanVleet rather than Mason Plumlee. But anyway, that's besides the point. I do think he's a really solid regular season player, though. And again, kind of like with Siakam, I don't think VanVleet's number 1. And he showed that in the playoffs when he was playing hero ball and chucking threes and just clanking them off the backboard like really bad. So like I said, I think they have a lot of solid number 2, number 3 guys. If Siakam can take that next step, like you seem to think that he can, and Lowry, his age doesn't come into play here, I think they definitely could be a title contender. But as I already said, I have my doubts with that, and I think the Raptors are much more of a 4 or 5, maybe win a playoff series type of team, which is still a solid season, but maybe not as great. Obviously, not as great as winning the championship like they did a couple years ago. What do you think?
Yeah, I actually do agree with you on that. Despite me thinking Siakam can take the next step, I think with the loss of Gasol and Ibaka, I think they hurt a little bit more than you do. I think Aaron fill in pretty nicely, but I think they're like you said, I think they have a very high floor. This is a team that I almost think is a shoe-in, unless they get 3 or 4 major injuries. I think they're pretty much a shoe-in for a top 6 seed. But I also don't think they have any chance of getting the 1 or 2 seed. I think they fit right nicely between the 3 and 5, 3 and 6 spots in the East. I think they're a team that could sneak into the Eastern Conference Finals again. I mean, they almost got there this year, but I think there's also a chance that they get bounced in the first round.
Yeah, I think they're definitely a playoff team. But if they're more on like they are the 6th seed or even maybe the 5 seed, there's definitely a world where I can see them losing out in the first round. I would say I have more faith in them with their continuity that they're able to get a 3 or 4 seed. Maybe some teams underperform that I think on paper are a little bit better, and they're able to win a series maybe with a little bit of higher seed. But I ultimately think the ceiling for this team, unless Siakam can really propel into superstardom, is the second round of the playoffs, which is maybe disappointing for some Raptors fans. But at the same time, it's much better than a lot of other franchises. So it's nothing to be sad about, I don't think. But we'll jump into our next team here. How would you take it away, Chris?
All right, so for the Philadelphia 76ers, a very interesting team to talk about, as they are every year. The process, will it continue to hold out or not be as productive as we thought it would be, or will they finally get over the hump this year? They definitely made quite a few moves, some of them important, some of them not so much. But on the addition side, we got Seth Curry, Danny Green, Dwight Howard, good veteran presence there, Terrence Ferguson as well, Justin Anderson, and then Tyrese Maxey, the rookie. And then they lost out on Alec Burks, and if you even really want to call it a loss, Al Horford, Josh Richardson, and then Raul Neto, Kyle O'Quinn, Zaire Smith, which who's a Piston now. So interesting on that. But a lot of additions, a lot of subtractions. Drew, I'll let you go over. Is there anyone you really want to talk about out of this before we get into the keys to watch?
The big thing for me is who is the alpha between Simmons and Embiid? Can they work together? And not all. I mean, we've kind of seen it in the past. It kind of ties in number three. The number three key to watch was will Doc Rivers push 76ers into title contention? Can Doc Rivers make that duo work? We saw with Brett Brown when actually they've been on the court together. They've actually been pretty successful. It's just that with injuries, lots of different things going on with them. It just never seems to work out. There's been some rumors maybe they don't like each other, but then Ben Simmons squashed those rumors recently. But the reason for me that this is so interesting is that if it doesn't work between Simmons and Embiid, then we might be seeing Ben Simmons in a Houston Rockets jersey here pretty soon. And we can see James Harden in the red, white, and blue of the Philadelphia 76ers. And we can see we'll be having this conversation during our midseason awards episodes. Who knows whether about who's the alpha between Embiid and Harden. Because if this doesn't work, they got Daryl Morey is there. He's not the GM, but he's basically the GM now of the 76ers. Obviously, loves James Harden, was with him in Houston. There's a lot of rumors going around right now that they might be looking to make a move here if the Simmons and Embiid thing doesn't work out. So it's going to be that's. I said how the Siakam thing is one of the top storylines. This is definitely one of the top storylines heading into the season is, will this work between Simmons and Embiid? And if it doesn't, where will the Sixers go from there? Because they can't just keep running this thing back. But I tend to lean on the side of that this could work, especially a lot of the moves they made where they had a lot of shooting around them rather than a guy like Al Horford, who's basically like another Joel Embiid. Great leader, great guy, great player on another team, just doesn't fit this scheme.
No.
And I think guys like Seth Curry, Danny Green, great guys, perfect guys to put around people with Embiid and Simmons' skill sets. And I think that this duo will work. And I think to answer the question, I don't think there has to be an alpha. I think they can both be co-alphas and be very successful. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think I do tend to agree with you. I think I do think they had a positive offseason personally. I think getting rid of Al Horford, Josh Richardson. I really didn't think Josh Richardson fit that well with this team either. He provided some scoring, but he's really streaky and he's not really a guy that shoots off the catch and shoot. They got two. I mean, yeah. Talking about Danny Green breaking up threes in the bubble, he's still a good spot up shooter. And then Seth Curry is one of the best shooters in the league as well. So adding those two, pairing them with Tobias Harris as well, another great spot up shooter. I think it's really going to help their spacing on offense, at least in their starting lineup, which we do have the point as well. Can their bench produce this season, which I'm interested to talk about because they don't really have a bench. So it's going to be a thing. But I think the alpha, I really do think they should build around Ben Simmons. I know he's the one that's getting rumored in the trades. I think he's the better player of the two guys. I think Simmons is a guy that could be a number one guy on a team that wins a championship. Embiid, I'm not really sure. They're both ball dominant. Embiid, obviously a great scorer, but also often injured, often doesn't give his best effort. Simmons is always out there giving it his all. He contributes in every single category except for with the three-point shot, which if he can ever get to 30% or even around like a Giannis level, he's going to be one of the best players in the league, in my opinion. I still think Simmons has a ton of room to grow. I think Embiid is more of a guy that has hit his ceiling, and Simmons, the younger guy as well, I think he's going to be I think he should be the alpha. I don't know if he is, though. I do tend to agree with you that they're co-alphas.
Like I said, it'll be really interesting to see because I agree with you too. I don't know if the fit would be great with Simmons and Harden. Maybe. I mean, Harden's more of a shooter. Simmons more of the playmaker guy. Harden can be able to work off ball a lot. But I think it does make more sense with Embiid and Harden, and that's why Simmons is in the trade rumors. But I like Ben Simmons. I didn't like him at first, like during his rookie year. Originally, I thought he was kind of overrated, but I've definitely been growing on him a little bit more. And even if he never develops a shot, he's still an amazing defender. He does amazing playmaker. He does literally everything else on the basketball court amazing. He's just not a great shooter, and that's still something that you can build around and be successful with. But you mentioned it there. Can the bench produce this season? You seem a little more hot on this topic, so I'll let you start this one off.
Well, I mean, like I said, they don't have a bench really. It's still, I mean, they have Thibault coming back. He's a pretty good player. I do like him at his defensive contributions. I think he's a really solid player. But I mean, the loss of Alec Burks, I think, is definitely going to hurt them. He's a good bench scorer, a guy that you can bring in when your starters are out. He can fill it up a little. He kind of showed that in the bubble when they were all banged up. He kind of entered the starting lineup and was putting up a ton of shots a game, but it was actually producing with them. I know it wasn't at a super efficient level, but I felt like he was dropping about 20 points a game despite them getting swept out of the first round. I feel like he was a big part of the reason they were even in any of those games. I do like the addition of Dwight Howard. I think he's going to help out Embiid. He's a veteran presence. I think he's
the social media content of Dwight Howard and Joel Embiid pairing. That's going to be pretty entertaining to see too. I mean,
yeah, I'm entertained.
Dynamic personalities.
Yeah. I'm very entertained to see how their dynamic works. I think it's going to be a good fit. Actually, I think Dwight, when Embiid's tired, I think they can lower Embiid's minutes in the regular season a little bit more. Give Dwight some of those minutes. He's not obviously not as good as Embiid, not even close, but he's a good defender. I think he's a good shot blocker still, an impact bench player. So I do like him. I think that's a definite increase because they really didn't have a backup center. I mean, Al Horford, they were trying to play him at the power forward. He wasn't doing much, and he just didn't really fit. They signed him to an eyesore of a contract, but luckily they were able to get him out of there. Now they have Danny Green's eyesore of a contract, but at least he's a better fit, I think, if he can improve shooting from last year. He may even come off the bench. I'm not really sure what they're going to do with him and Curry. One of them two probably will come off the bench and be a good shooter. That's what they need. They need a guy or two on the bench that can step up, and maybe Tyrese Maxey could be another guy that could step up as well for them.
Yeah, honestly, I think he's got guys, and I think that's most important. Because you got, like you said, they have Curry, they got Green. They may sneak into the starting lineup alongside Tobias Harris, who honestly I kind of forget is there. But the Harris, Embiid, Simmons, those are your three main starters, and then they can sneak guys in like a Curry, like Danny Green. It wouldn't surprise me if Terrence Ferguson gets some minutes. He's not an awful player. Furkan Korkmaz. They got the Tyrese Maxey, the rookie. Shake Milton. Mike Scott isn't an awful player. Matisse Thybulle. They got guys, and I think you don't need huge bench depth. You would probably prefer it on a team where your two-star players and Embiid and Simmons tend to get hurt. But as long as you got, I would say, 3 to 4 guys coming off the bench where you have an 8 or 9 man rotation, you can still be a really solid team. And I feel like the Sixers, it might take some feeling out. Doc Rivers, new coach, we'll talk about in a second. He might have to play around with the rotation a little bit. They might not get off to a slow start. But I think once they find that nice rhythm, I think they're going to have a solid enough bench. Because like I said, as long as Embiid and Simmons stay healthy, and those that doesn't come into play, I think they can find a reasonable 3 or 4 guys, whether it's Korkmaz, Shake Milton, Matisse Thybulle, Mike Scott, whatever the guys I said. I think they can find a solid bench. I don't think it might not be a huge positive like on some other teams, but I don't think it'll be a huge negative either.
Yeah, they definitely just need to improve from last year on their huge negatives on the. But I think Doc Rivers, like you said, we'll get into it right now. Doc Rivers, I think, could definitely push them over the edge here. I think he's definitely an upgrade at head coach for sure. I think, personally, I'll just answer the question we got on there. Will Doc Rivers push the Sixers into title contention? I actually tend to think that he will. I think they're better than the Raptors, personally, looking at them right now. I don't know what it is. I have a weird optimism around the 76ers team this year. I think they're going to be a top 3 seed in the league. I think they're going to finish ahead of the Raptors. They could end up being even the best team in this division. We will find out. I mean, the Celtics and the Nets definitely have an argument for that, for sure. But I think they're going to be right there. Obviously, this division is loaded with talent. 4 teams that could do it. But I think he's going to get the most out of Ben Simmons and Embiid and possibly James Harden if Simmons gets traded. But we'll have to see. I think it's a pretty good fit, though. I tend to think that they have a good chance of at least being a title contender.
Yeah, and I'll spoil my future picks. I think this team is going to be the best team in this division, at least in terms of the regular season. I think the Nets are a little bit better than the Sixers come playoff time, but I think they're going to be resting guys. They're not going to be taking the regular season as seriously. I think the Sixers, though, will no doubt about it be a 2-3 seed. And I think I said this last year going into the season, and it bit me in the butt, and they were awful. But I don't think Brett Brown was a terrible coach, but I think he was just there for too long. It was time to get a new voice in there. Doc Rivers, say what you will. I know Paul George is saying that he's a bad coach and he's the reason the Clippers lost. Well, Paul George's lack of accountability is least of Doc Rivers' concerns here in Philadelphia. I think he'll be able to find a nice match between Simmons and Embiid, or Harden and Embiid if that trade ends up happening. He'll get a good bench rotation. I think he's a really solid coach. Won a championship with the Celtics in the past. And I think they're going to be a top 3 seed. And I think they could. It would not surprise me if this team sneaks into the finals. Are they going to win the title? Who knows? But I think this is definitely a Eastern Conference championship level of a team for sure. But
yeah, I agree with that.
I think that's enough Sixers talk for now. So we'll jump into their division rival, the Boston Celtics. We're going from blue to green here. It's kind of embarrassing, real quick, is that the Celtics were the one team I forgot to say, and the Celtics are the shirt that I'm wearing at the moment. So that's a little embarrassing, but whatever. In terms of additions, last year, so they finished 48-24, third in the Eastern Conference. They made it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals, but got upset by the Miami Heat. We'll talk about that, about how they can never reach the finals. It seems like they can always reach Eastern Conference Finals, but they can never get over the top. We'll talk about that in a second. But first, in terms of their additions, they got Tristan Thompson, former Cleveland Cavalier. They drafted Peyton Pritchard and Aaron Nesmith. I can never say his name correctly. And then Jeff Teague. In terms of subtractions, they lost Gordon Hayward, Enes Kanter, and Brad Wanamaker. In terms of three keys to watch, we'll start off with who can fill in for Hayward's offense. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, obviously, I think the clear guy that's going to fill in is Jason. I think he's going to see an uptick in scoring this year. I do think this team got a little bit worse in the offseason. I think Gordon Hayward, say what you want about him, he provides excellent scoring for this team. He's a good shooter. I think they're definitely going to miss that. I think especially early in the season, this is kind of tying into number 2 as well, because Kemba is going to miss the start of the regular season. I think he got a knee scope in the offseason. He's going to miss some time. But, Tatum, he's going to have to really take over early on in the season, especially. And then down the playoffs, he definitely played well in the playoffs and in the bubble. But he needs to take that next step. I mean, they just signed him to a massive extension. He's got the money. He's got the bag, and he's a really good player. I think he's got all the tools to become one of the next superstars and a consensus top 10 player in the league. Like, I actually do think he's approaching now. I think he's just on the outside the fringe of the top 10, but I think this year he could definitely solidify his way into that top 10 group of players in the league.
I 100% agree there. But I will touch on what you said there at the beginning, where this is a team that you think they got worse in the offseason. I 100% agree. I mean, when I was first thinking about when we were preparing for these episodes, I was thinking that the Celtics were going to be one of my final favorites. But then I thought about it. I looked at their roster, and they lost some guys. And Tristan Thompson, I think, is an upgrade over Enes Kanter easily. But then Gordon Hayward, they never really addressed his loss off the bench. And I know people, because he had a bad injury, isn't the same player. He has a huge contract, but he's still a solid scorer, and he was decent for them last year, aside from the injury concerns. But now you just got a bunch of, we mentioned the rookies there. You got Semi Ojeleye, you got all these guys off the bench: Grant Williams, Robert Williams, Daniel Tice. I think he'll actually be starting. Carson Edwards, Taco Fall, Romeo Langford. You got all these really unknowns. And we talked about how the Sixers might have some bench issues. I'm more concerned about the Celtics depth issues for sure, because they already lost Kemba. So now you have Jeff Teague in the starting lineup most likely. If they could lose another guy to injury, they could be in trouble here. I think they're going to make the playoffs, but it is a bit of a concern for sure.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I was excited to address this about the Celtics. I think for the reason you just said, if Kemba can't, like he's a number 2, I'll kind of get into that at the same time. If he can't stay on the floor, which I really don't know if he can, he's been very injury prone throughout his career and has had knee problems, and that's never a thing you want for whether it's NFL, NBA, any sport. Knee problems usually tend to last and prolong or shorten a career, or at least a career like Kemba where he's a superstar. I've seen a little bit of regression since he's went there. I didn't think he was quite as effective last season, but that could have been just, trying to fit into the offense. So maybe this year when he gets back, he'll be better. But I think that serious bench problems this year. I think Aaron Nesmith, an absolute money shooter, probably the best shooter in the entire class, an absolute splasher from deep. If he can make more of an impact, then, I don't think a lot of people are hyping him up, but I think he can make enough of an impact to be one of their top bench players. I think he kind of fits in that Seth Curry role. Seth Curry role. He's going to kind of fit into that as the Sixers, and he's going to be a money shooter for them because they definitely need it off the bench. But other than that, man, Tristan Thompson, he's decent, but him and I really just don't. I don't know. I'm not really sure. Is Daniel Tice their starting center still? I probably expect him to start over Thompson. Thompson rebounding, but not really much else. And then Jeff Teague. Talk about old and bad. This dude's like 37 years old. He's okay. He's a quality backup. But when you got to throw him in the starting lineup, who's playing behind him? Are we putting Peyton Pritchard behind him? I'm repping him apparently with the Oregon sweatshirt, but I really didn't intentionally do that. But I guess we'll have to see. But I really think their bench is going to be a massive problem. There's a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, I don't know. It's gonna be interesting to see because Kemba Walker, he seems like these injuries kind of keep popping up. I know he has a timetable, but he's getting older. He's already 30, which isn't old in real people terms, but it's kind of old in basketball terms. And these injuries are not going to go away as he progresses in age. And if they lose another guy, I mean, they got Marcus Smart, they got Jason Tatum, they got Jaylen Brown. I don't hate the Daniel Tice and Tristan Thompson duo at center. I think that's a solid duo. But like I said, if Kemba can't come back and they lose another guy to injury, I mean, it's going to get really interesting. And you're going to need one of these rookies to step up. You're going to need some of these second-year guys. I mean, Carson Edwards was a really hyped up guy going into his rookie year, didn't really do anything. You're going to need some of these guys to step up. And that kind of leads into our final key to watch with the Celtics, which do they have enough to finally reach the finals? If Kemba can come back, it's a lot of ifs. If Kemba can come back, if nobody else gets hurt, and if some of these rookies and younger players can step up and fill that void that Hayward left and make their bench better and give them some more depth, I think absolutely they can reach the finals. Can they beat a Lakers or a Clippers in the West? I don't think so, but they can. But however, in my personal belief, I think that their ceiling is maybe the 2 seed in the East and an Eastern Conference Finals appearance. I think that might be their ceiling. If I had to put money on it right now, I think their chance of losing in the first round is more likely than them making the finals, and that's just my personal opinion. I don't love this roster, but I think I see them as a 3-4 seed winning a playoff series or two, and that's kind of their ceiling. I don't really see them reaching the finals. I think they got worse in the offseason, as you said, and that's disappointing because I feel like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, we have them on the screen there. They're one of the most electrifying duos in the league. And I think honestly, if Jaylen Brown becomes a super duper star, kind of like Jason Tatum did last year, especially in the second half, I think they could be a real finals favorite. But that's, like I said, tons of ifs there. But what do you think?
Let's see. I actually disagree. I think I know I kind of agree with you, but all the what ifs that are this team really, for me, eliminates them from NBA Finals contention. I think they are similar to the Raptors team. I don't think the Raptors are going to make it either. I think that they're in that tier as well. I'm a little bit lower on them. I think they're going to be around the 4-6 seed. They're going to be fighting with the Raptors. Maybe they'll even be the 4-5 matchup in the first round. I think that's definitely a possibility.
Yeah.
I agree. I think they have a chance to get bounced in the first round. I think it would take massive improvements from Jason Tatum, where he's averaging like 31 a game, for them to be
possible.
A good team. Which, I mean, it's possible, but like you said, with a lot of ifs, Kemba would have to be healthy for that to be the case. If he averages 31, Kemba's not there. They're eliminated already from finals contention for me. I think they really need Kemba, and as well as their lack of bench depth, I think really hurts this team. For all the Celtics fan out there, it might hurt a little bit, but I don't think this is the year for them. I mean, you never know. I mean, I'm very wrong about some NFL predictions throughout our previews and those as well, and throughout all my record and every week when we do the pick 'em. So, I mean, obviously I could be wrong, but I really think this team ceiling is a finals appearance.
Yeah, when you said you disagreed with me, I thought you meant I was too harsh on them. I thought I was being a little too harsh on them, but then you thought I wasn't harsh enough. So that's interesting. I think this is a team who I think a lot of people are just like chalking in, oh, they're going to make the Eastern Conference Finals again. But then when you start doing some research, looking at their roster, you're like, I don't know if they're not better than the Sixers. They're not better than the Nets. They're not better than the Bucks. They're like, I agree. They're much more in that second tier teams in terms of like the Heat and the Raptors. At least those are my teams I have in that tier. I'm not sure if that's how you feel as well, but
yeah.
We'll jump into our second to last team here. Maybe the most interesting team in the NBA, period. It's maybe between them and the Clippers in terms of on the court drama, off the court drama. But the Clippers, none of their players are pouring sage on their former team's bleachers. So Kyrie Irving did that to the Celtics, obviously. But Chris, take it away here with the Nets.
All right, so the Nets last year, fourth in the division, but honestly, these are totally irrelevant. Record was 35-37. They got bounced in the first round and didn't look very good in the playoffs. But, I mean, they were missing just so many guys, and obviously the two superstars, Kyrie Irving and Kevin Durant. But they were able to add Bruce Brown, a veteran guard that me and Drew know, or not a veteran guard, a young guard, a depth piece guard that me and Drew know very well, formerly from the Detroit Pistons. Jeff Green, a veteran presence for the forwards, and Landry Shamet as well. But they lost Garrett Temple Jamal Crawford, which I honestly didn't even know he was still on the roster. He's like 75
They
now.
signed him for the bubble. They signed him for the bubble.
Oh yeah, I do remember that actually. Yep. They also have Wilson Chandler, a lot of old guys. Michael Beasley, jeez, dinosaurs right here, man. And then Justin Anderson as well. But yeah, they lost some veteran presence, but guys that probably weren't going to be on the roster anyway with the guys coming back. But the Nets obviously super interesting team. You can throw out pretty much everything they did last year. This was basically a fully new team. It's like an expansion team. It was a team that didn't even play last season. I mean, their best player was Karis LeVert. He's debatably, well, he's probably their third best, but maybe even their fourth best option with Dinwiddie coming back as well. But we'll start with kind of what Drew was talking about with the Kyrie Irving already, saging up his former team, the Boston Celtics arena. Very interesting for him, and he already got fined by the media for not appearing on the media as well instead of addressing I think he had like almost like an online paper or something like that for his media or whatever. I don't even know what he's trying to do, but already got fined, already, making headlines for multiple things that haven't been on the court yet. But do we really think he can keep his cool for the full season? I'll start. I don't know if it matters, man. I think this team is just too good. I think as long as he doesn't get injured, which he's another guy kind of like Kemba that I feel like gets injured often and battles through a lot of injuries. If he's not injured, I think regardless of whether or not he keeps his cool, he will be good for this team. And I think he's still a very good player and a potential point guard on an NBA championship team, as we'll talk about later, I'm sure. But Drew, what do you think about Kyrie?
No, I don't think he can keep his cool. I mean, the season hasn't even started yet, and he's already doing stuff. But I'm with you. I don't think it matters. I think with a team like the Celtics, and I mean, I know it's still the New York media market, so Kyrie Irving's going to be a huge character there. Got a lot of media attention, as he already has. But I think he just didn't mesh with the Celtics. He didn't mesh with LeBron. He didn't mesh with the Cavs. I think him and KD are genuinely friends. I mean, they're going on Instagram Live together, and I think that'll help him out, is that he's got another guy that might be just as weird as he is, and Kevin Durant. And it's disappointing to an extent, because I feel like you see some of the charity work and the really great things that Kyrie Irving does off the court, but then he just overshadows it by just being, quite frankly, just saying weird stuff and doing weird stuff and just getting a lot of negative attention towards him. And I think he's got to be careful not alienating fans, because this is actually a Kyrie Irving Boston Celtics shirt. I used to be a pretty big Kyrie guy, and then he kind of turned me off a little bit, but I'm with you. It's more in terms of, can he stay healthy? But I'm in the camp of his last year's injuries were more of just kind of a conspiracy, and because he didn't really like the team and KD wasn't there, and he was kind of just like, yeah, I'm just gonna take the year off. Who cares? I'm more in that camp. I don't think they were maybe as bad as he was saying they were. Maybe, and I think he could have played if he wanted to. But they have been an issue for in the past. That's a fact. So I think that's more of a concern, because even if he doesn't keep his cool, if he's doing weird stuff off the court, this is a team, and we'll talk about probably a little bit later too. They have such a wide range of outcomes, right? I mean, there's a world where this Kyrie stuff blows up, KD's not the same player, everything goes wrong, and they're the 7th seed and they lose in the first round. There's also a world where Kyrie and KD are great. They're the greatest team ever. They're the 1 seed. They win the championship. And the weird thing is, I think with them, and as well as the Clippers, are the only 2 teams where those 2 huge range of outcomes are extremely realistic, and I can envision either of them happening. So I honestly, I know I said no, he can't keep his cool, but in terms of the effects of that, I have no idea. And anyone unless you're like, and your Woj or your Shams and you have insider information, they're the only ones that maybe can make a reasonable assumption as to how this team is going to play. But for me, I mean, who knows, man? I mean, honestly, who knows?
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on that. I really just don't know. This team has a wide range of outcomes, and I'll get into it. I have a bold prediction on this team after we get into our second and third point, but it's kind of similar to the Kyrie talk, just more of on the court. Is KD the same player after his injury? I'll start it off. I mean, I watched a little bit of their preseason game. He looked absolutely fine to me. I think he's going to be just as good as he always, maybe even better in this system. I'm not sure. There's a lot of talent around him. Maybe he kind of plays the LeBron role, maybe not, while not still being the best player. Kyrie also is awesome, kind of like Anthony Davis is. And I think that maybe his production goes down to maybe 25 a game, but I think he's going to get a couple more assists a game. I think he can make more of an impact on the defensive side. I'm a little bit more worried about his defensive game than his offense being impact. I think his offense will be absolutely fine. He wasn't. I really don't think it was his athleticism that got him. I think it was more of his skill and length, and he still has both of those clearly. I think those will help him obviously score a ton of points. And he wasn't like somebody that needed to dunk every time or anything. He was more just a smooth score, made everything look so easy. I don't think that changes much. But defensively, he was really starting to come into his own before the injury. I thought he was one of the better defenders at the forward position, and maybe even in the league as well. I think he really stepped up defensively throughout his career. That's really the area that's gotten better. But it's going to remain to be seen if he's going to be able to still continue to play good defense. I think he will, but I think there's a chance as well that he's not the same player defensively.
Yeah, I'll start with the KD point. Even if he's not 100% back to the player he was, if he's 85 to 90%, I mean, that's fine.
So good.
That's fine. I mean, I know the last time we saw him play was June 2019 during the finals. And if you think about where you were in your life in June 2019 and where we are now, it's a very long time. A lot of stuff's happened, and it's easy to forget. KD was literally probably the second best player in the NBA, arguably the best player in the NBA. People were having conversations about him passing LeBron in terms of the best player in the world. So if he's only 85 to 90% of that player, because this Achilles injury is a really serious thing. I mean, we saw it with Kobe. I know he was more in the twilight of his career, but Kobe can never really truly recover from it. Plenty of guys can never truly recover from it. So there's a good chance he won't be 100% back to that guy. And I agree with you. I think that might be seen on the defensive end. But at the same time, if 85 to 90% of Kevin Durant is still a top 10 player in the NBA easily. So he's going to be really good, I think, as long as he stays healthy. These injuries, they kind of pop up with him, it seems like, from time to time. But hopefully he stays healthy and he's good to go. I did want to touch on when you said about their defense. That's the main worry I have with them. I think they're going to score a ton of points. It's just defensively, I think that might be where they lack. And they're going to need some guys to step up there. And maybe it'll be some guys in our final point there. You mentioned the roles for Karis LeVert, Spencer Dinwiddie, and the bigs in terms of Jared Allen and DeAndre Jordan, most notably. You'd also throw a Joe Harris, a Jeff Green, who I kind of forgot they got, Landry Shamet. They got a lot of solid role players. But what do you think? And these, I know they added some of them. A lot of these guys were there alpha dogs last season, and now they're taking more of a complimentary role. Where do you think they go, Chris? And do you think these guys will get traded? They're in plenty of trade rumors, most notably with James Harden too. Do you think Harden finds his way in Brooklyn?
Yeah, I think that's a possibility, but I'll address it like they're going to be on the roster throughout this. Yeah. I think it would be very smart to have. I don't know if he'd love it, but Karis LeVert coming off the bench would be awesome. They don't need all this scoring. They just need. I mean, you could throw a guy like Bruce Brown in the two guard because he's a good defender. That would be a good idea for them, and potentially instead of having LeVert play there, and then they have a guy like DeAndre Jordan or Jared Allen also in the starting lineup. The other one coming off the bench with LeVert and Dinwiddie. Dinwiddie will be on the bench. He always is. He's a great six-man, always in the six-man consideration. Unfortunately, used to play for the Pistons. We didn't unlock his full potential. Like pretty much every player. Another guy, Chris Middleton, we'll talk about in plenty when we get to the Bucks. But a guy like Dinwiddie, a good scorer off the bench, LeVert can fill it up. Prove that he could actually maybe even be the guy on a bad team at least, but be a number 2 or number 3 option on a good team, in my opinion. I think he's a good scorer. He's a decent enough defender as well. I think having him come off the bench, I would say maybe with Jared Allen too, I think that would be the better guy to get on the bench. Those 3 off the bench would be awesome, and I think would really help this team's floor go up as well. Like you said, they have a wider range of outcomes. I don't think it's as wide. I think this is a top 5 seed. My bold prediction before, and I'll let you kind of react to it since I kind of went over all the bench pieces you can talk about. My bold prediction is this will be your 2021 NBA Finals champion. I think they're winning it all this year. That's my bold prediction. I think they're going to win it all. I think they have all the pieces they need. And like you said, whether they trade for Harden or not, they lose Kyrie. I think that could be a potential upgrade and make them even more of a high chance to win the NBA Finals. This is my NBA Finals champion for this year, though. I think they have a ton of depth than either the Sixers or the Celtics in the division. And I think KD could end up being the most valuable player potentially. We'll see. But I think that's the most likely outcome is maybe not them winning the NBA Finals, but them being right up there in consideration. I think that's the favorites in the East for me.
On paper, yeah, I 100% agree with you. I mean, you touched on all the complimentary role guys. as well as, I mean, Tyler Johnson. I mean, I'm looking at the like Timothée Luwawu-Cabarrot,
Yeah, he can score.
Torian Prince. I always say is Kuruks. He's a decent player. Like DeAndre Jordan, we barely even talked about him. I mean, Bruce Brown was a solid guy with the Pistons. He could also bring that defensive energy there.
Yes, I like him.
I mean, they're a really solid roster on paper. I think they're better than the Bucks. I think the reason I don't think they're going to be the 1 seed is just because they're going to rest guys like Kyrie and KD. They're not going to take the regular season as seriously. The one worry I would have with the Nets winning a championship, along with the injuries and the off-the-court drama, is if some of the stuff happens to happen with the Clippers last year, where they have chemistry issues. And I think that's the big worry there with LeVert, Dinwiddie, and the complementary role guys. Will they buy in? And I think with a guy like Steve Nash, former player, players coach, I think he's literally the perfect coach for this team.
He is. I agree.
Him and KD are already friends. By all accounts, him and Kyrie get along well. And I think you're talking me into it, man. I thought there was a world where they're not a good team, and I still believe that, but I think it's definitely more likely that they at least make the finals. Are they going to beat the Lakers? I don't know, but that would be a really entertaining finals with the Nets and the Lakers. Yeah, KD versus LeBron. You got Kyrie versus LeBron. Kyrie calling out LeBron, saying he's not clutch. I don't know if you saw that interview, but yeah, they're a really fun team. They're really entertaining. And I don't know. Do you have anything else you want to add? I mean, you kind of dropped your hot take of the episode, I guess, already.
No, yeah, I think you said it perfectly to support me as well. Whether or not you totally believe, I think you think they're a little bit wider range of outcome, but I'm glad I was able to talk you into it because I think they're going to be really good, man. I think this is the best team in the East, and I'm excited. Maybe they don't finish with the best record, but it doesn't matter to me as long as they don't have any major injuries throughout the season, and they can even overcome a decent starter like LeVert or Dinwiddie going down with guys like Shamet, Bruce Brown, Jeff Green, guys that can fill in those roles as well. As long as KD or Kyrie don't get hurt, I think this is a finals contender and potential champion as I predicted previously. But yeah,
I gotta say, I wasn't buying the hype, but I'm kind of buying the hype now. I like this team.
I like it. Yeah, so that's the episode. Now we have the York Knicks, so we can get into.
This will take us over 2 seconds to go over.
Yeah. Go ahead and go over the additions and subtractions.
I guess if I have to, I'm talking about the Knicks. So additions, they do have an interesting rookie, an Obi Toppin, a rookie, Emmanuel Quickly, also a rookie. Then they just got a bunch of guys, kind of like they did last year. Last year they got a bunch of big guys. This year they got a bunch of, aside from Nerlens Noel, they got a bunch of shooting guard, swingman type of players, and Alec Burks, Austin Rivers, and Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. They lost Bobby Portis, Mo Harkless, Taj Gibson, Wayne Ellington. Solid role players, but they were like their main guys. Some of them were their main guys last year, which isn't great for a team, obviously. And last year they finished 21-45, missed the playoffs again, which was good for 12th in the Eastern Conference. Not a whole lot. They also added Tom Thibodeau as their coach. It'll be interesting to see if that works. Obviously, it did not work in Minnesota at all. So maybe he's the guy that turns this crap show around, but who knows? I tend to think not. Really, the main thing to talk about here is with RJ Barrett. I think you put, is RJ Barrett a bust? So how about you take it away here? Do you think he's a bust, or do you think he's still got some untapped potential there?
I think it is too early to tell, but I am kind of leaning towards that. I don't think he's ever going to live up to the potential of his high draft capital. I think he's going to be all right. But he just is so inefficient watching him play last year. This was a case of somebody's got to score the ball. I know they got Julius Randle, who's a pretty decent, you could call him like a 4-5 combo player. He's a pretty good player, but other than that, they really didn't have a lot of scoring options. I mean, Bobby Portis was the guy they signed to be one of their guys, and I mean that says it enough. Bobby Portis is not a player. He's not someone that's going to be a huge impact player on most teams, but he was here. RJ Barrett really couldn't get it done. I mean, he didn't shoot very efficiently from three, which was a part of me that was worried that Zion basically had so much attention in that offense. Guys like Cam Reddish, RJ Barrett were just left with open shots all the time, and Barrett definitely will take them. He is a guy that is a shoot-first player and will gladly shoot at will pretty much. But, I mean, I'm leaning towards the fact that I think he has a high likelihood of being a bust. Obviously, too early to tell right now, so the headline is a little bit clickbaity, misleading, that he's already a bust. You can't tell. He could have made massive strides, but, I mean, watching him a little bit against the Pistons, he looked kind of like the same player as last year, where he's just inefficient, can get hot every once in a while, but will average points that end up being empty stats.
I'm a little more, I think, positive on Barrett's outlook, I think, because, I mean, he's in maybe the worst position that anyone could ever come into the NBA with. I mean, look at the two guys taken ahead of him, and he was a part of that big three, which a lot of us forget. It was Ja Morant and Zion Williamson, and Barrett got in by far the worst situation that a player could get into, right? I mean, I know the Pelicans and technically the Grizzlies, they made it to the play-in tournament, but they didn't make it to the playoffs. I know both those teams didn't make the playoffs, but they have a clear direction. They have a lot of talent. They have solid coaching. They're in a really good spot. And Barrett is just none of those things apply to the Knicks. So if the Knicks can turn it around, I think RJ Barrett could be a really good player. I still have a lot of confidence in him. Or we could see something happen to him like happened to like a guy like Brandon Ingram, who he was kind of a decent player. Will it ever happen for his first few seasons? And then Ingram gets traded away from the Lakers and he becomes an all-star in his first year away with New Orleans last year. So I could see that happen with RJ Barrett very likely as well. I think he's a solid player. I think he's got talent. I think it's more of a systemic failure in terms of the Knicks rather than it being a detriment to RJ Barrett. But you're right. He didn't help himself in any way. But the second point here, I think, is mainly just because we didn't really know what else to talk about with the Knicks. This is just, quite frankly, one of the most boring teams in the league. I think they are lottery bound, top 5 pick bound once again. But we have finding an identity, and we're going to kind of combine these. I think these next two, finding an identity, and rookie scorers. Let's just say, I'm just going to ask you this question: who do you think takes a step? You think it's Obi-Wan Toppin? I know people are calling him Obi-Wan Kenobi, all this stuff. He's the chosen one, even though, not to get Star Wars here, but Anakin Skywalker was the chosen one. But anyway, none of that matters. You see, that's how uninteresting the Knicks are. I'm talking about Star Wars, not talking about the Knicks. Anyway. Do you think it's going to be Obi Toppin? Do you think it's going to be a guy like Kevin Knox, Frank Ntilikina, Mitchell Robinson? Maybe I like Mitchell Robinson. I think RJ Barrett is good. But do you think anyone steps up here, rookie or otherwise, that makes the Knicks at least a little bit enjoyable, a little bit worth watching?
I think the only really redeemable quality about this team is Obi Toppin. It still remains to be seen if he's going to be good or not. But I'm a huge Dayton fan, so I love him. I really hope he succeeds, and I'm a really big fan. I'm kind of glad he got drafted here because I want to see if he can be the actual guy of a team. Obviously, he's not going to average 30 points his rookie year. He's not that caliber of player, nor is any other rookie that comes into the league, pretty much. But I think he has the potential to be an all-star. Not this year, but down the road. I think he's a good player. It's going to be fun watching his high-flying dunks. He's obviously a great dunker. Not the best defender, but offensively is pretty polished. I think he's going to be a very good contributor. I think he's going to average north of 15 a game, chip in some rebounds, an occasional assist or two there, can shoot the 3-ball as well. I really do like Obi Toppin. I was hoping the Pistons would get him. Unfortunately, that was not the case. But a guy that I'm higher on than most but maybe a little bit of my bias, homerness of the Dayton Flyers basketball team, one of my favorite players ever to come from there, and the best player in Dayton history. So I think he is the guy that has the best chance of stepping up. Obviously, RJ Barrett, Julius Randle, guys like that. Even I do like Mitchell Robinson. I think he's a good young center, a guy that's developing the league. But I really just don't think they have enough firepower to be even remotely competitive. I think they're going to be competing for that number one pick. I don't think they're the worst team in the league, but they're definitely not. They're closer to that than they are a playoff spot.
For sure. 100%. And I'll touch more on the finding an identity part. I think that they need to build around RJ Barrett, Obi Toppin, and Mitchell Robinson. Those are their big three. And then they can they can trade everybody else. Because, I mean, they got like Alfred Payton. Like, I will give the front office credit. I think they have good guys. The Knicks of the past would have thrown a bunch of money at a guy like, I don't know, Fred VanVleet. They would have gave
Julius Randle like they did.
They would have gave, but even that contract isn't untradeable, right? They would have gave like $40 million a year to Fred VanVleet or something like that. It would have been something nuts like that just to make the playoffs. I think the front office is doing a really good job at being bad because this draft coming up is going to be really, really good. And I think, and there's a ton of, we'll talk about throughout each of these NBA preview episodes, there's a ton of teams that are trying to compete. I mean, even looking at their division, the teams we talked about before, all those teams are really good. The Knicks are going to lose a ton of games. They're going to get, I think, a really good shot at least a top 3 pick, maybe even number 1. Already mentioned next year's draft is really, really good. Cade Cunningham, maybe he looked really good in the blue and orange. Who knows? I think he would. And then you have a really solid young core there. And also, come the trade deadline, they got guys like Nerlens Noel, Alec Burks, Austin Rivers, Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. You mentioned Julius Randle, Dennis Smith Jr., who knows? They have guys that they start for the Knicks, which is not a good thing at all, but they could be really nice role players, bench guys for a playoff team, and I think teams could come knocking. if those guys come available. And if the Knicks do smart there, do smart with the draft, next year, I'm talking about 21-22 might also be kind of brutal. But 22-23, if their young guys develop well, they trade well, they draft well, this could be a solid team. And I think that's key to finding an identity. But they could also throw a bunch of money at a crap player next free agency, and none of this means anything. But that's at least what I think the Knicks should do. And I think this season, as brutal as it'll be for Knicks fans yet again, might be the first step towards that.
Yeah, just before we conclude the episode, I just wanted to say for you Knicks fans out there, I know it's been a rough time, but my friend was the New York Knicks in a 2K rebuild. He got the first overall pick, got Cade Cunningham. A few years later, he won the NBA final. So, hey, you got, the future could be brighter. You never know. Cade Cunningham is a potential generational talent, and it could get better.
2K is basically real life too. So, I mean,
yeah,
if it happens in 2K, it can happen in real life for sure. But there, as bad as it looks like for the Knicks, there is some very, very far in the distance. There is some light at the end of that very, very long tunnel. So, hopefully it'll happen for the Knicks. Good luck. But all the other 4 teams in this division are going to be really, really good this year. And it was super fun talking to you about it today, Chris. But once again, we are the Zone Defense Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Spotify and Twitter at Zone Defense Pod, and search us on Apple Podcasts. Be sure to check out all of our NFL episodes we've done. We've done a ton of those, as well as all of the other NBA preview episodes. We'll have 6 parts. Focusing on each division in the NBA. So this was part 1, obviously, so definitely be on the lookout for the next 5 parts. Also, be sure to smash that like button and leave your comments down below. Let us know your thoughts on any of these 5 teams, and also give us your predictions. And if you think we're right or you think we're wrong, we love hearing from you. But thanks for listening to this episode, and we'll see you next time.
Peace.